How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Halos in the Infield. Me, Fernando, the Lone Star Halo, Todd Fox, and the legend himself, Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. All that and more coming up next.
Hey, you are now listening or watching the Halos in the Infield podcast, sponsored in part by Noble L Works over on 1621 South Sinclair, where you can get discounts by just mentioning HITI, Halos in the Infield, drink discounts on us, baby. And also by 714 tickets, 714 tickets, 714 tickets. The price you see is the price you get, and you also get 10% additionally off in the Apply Now code once you order your tickets just by mentioning HITI, Halos in the Infield. Now enjoy the show. Hey, it's Todd Fox here, as Fernando brought you in as we're doing a show with Lee Hacksaw Hamilton again. He's going to give us his viewpoint on many things. We're going to talk all things Southern California baseball and the aftermath of the trade deadline. So, Fernando, what do you want to kick off with first here and ask Lee?
So the first thing I want to ask you, there was something I heard with, Jennifer Aniston? She was talking about how easy it is nowadays for influencers to become famous, and it kind of makes her upset being a celebrity because of all the work she had to do. How does that make you feel nowadays for somebody who's been in the industry for so long, the sports talk industry, and you now seeing podcasters? And I know you have a podcast yourself now, but what's it like knowing that it's easy for anybody to just hop on, give a sports take, and potentially get that level of fame in this type of field?
Well, I think it's interesting that, the technology has changed so drastically, guys, that you can do podcasts from anywhere. I have my podcast that I do on Mondays and Thursdays, and we did it from Oregon, and we did it from Oregon to Ireland, and we did it from Canada to San Diego. So globally, because of technology, you can go anywhere. And everybody but my golden retrievers probably got a podcast now in the world. Now, that being said, guys, is the content any good? Is anybody watching it? That's the big issue right now. So technology is great. It's kind of like social media. X, Twitter, it's kind of taken over the world. It's overwhelmed us, and everybody's got their own X account. But is anybody putting really good content on their X account, or guys are just being out there for, quote, the chance to be out there? So it's just really a different world. I would have never imagined that when I was doing sports talk radio in San Diego for all those years on the original Extra Sports 690 and then on the mighty 1090, I would never have imagined we would evolve into what we are now. And there's so much noise out there, and there's so many people out there doing stuff on social networking. So it's really, really a different world. But some of us are still old school. And yeah, I might be doing my podcast, and I write on my website every day. And I also have a Royal manual typewriter in my garage. So some of us are doing new things, but some of us are still a little bit old school.
And by the way,
it's fair to say it doesn't bother you then?
No, everybody's doing their own thing. I'll let somebody else judge whether it's good content or not.
And by the way, those awesome blogs that you put out there and your website, you want to let your social media out there before we get into the meat and potatoes?
Well, at the end of the day, I write on my website every day. It's an in-depth evaluation of all the stories in sports. The website is leehacksawhamilton.com. I guarantee you, if you guys check it every morning, you'll be the second and third smartest guy on this podcast, aside from the guy that wrote it. So that's the website. And then, of course, I do a podcast on Monday and Thursday on my YouTube channel. That's Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. So sample it like everybody else. You can compare it to anything you want, but I'm pleased. I've been doing it a long, long time.
Absolutely. Golden content for sure.
You and John Raleigh do a great job.
Thank you. All right, let's talk baseball.
Let's do it. Well, Lee, I want to throw it out there right away. Winners and losers in your mind of the trade deadline. We're obviously about a week or more past, and there was teams that needed to do things and teams that didn't need to do things. Who are your winners and losers?
Well, I would have never thought on that 30th that we would have the number of deals we had, guys. 59 trades in all, 29 starting pitchers removed, 49 relief pitchers were in packages, and 89 minor leaguers were thrown into these deals. I mean, it was phenomenal what happened. Now, that being said, a couple of big names did not get traded, and I think that stunned as many people as the number of deals that were out there. I would say off the top of my head that the Padres and Dodgers won the trade deadline. To me, it's really intriguing how they got there and got these deals done. The Padres, under A.J. Preller, the general manager, have just consistently traded away all the blue chip prospects. You know, AJ went out and got 3 pitchers at the trade deadline because they were destitute and worn out in the bullpen. But he traded away 6 more quality prospects. And on the season, AJ Preller has made 5 trades dating back to the end of spring training. He's traded away 14 of the top 16 players in the farm system to build what he hopes is going to be the rest of the roster that's going to push this thing into October, then maybe push the Padres even into being a World Series team. But he's auctioned off the whole future. I'm of the opinion that they have to be in the World Series this year or next year, because after that, they'll have a lot of age. They're stuck with a lot of long-term contracts, and there's nobody left in the farm system. There are only 2 players that are rated anywhere in the national rankings, are both in Class A or in the rookie league. So they got to win right now, because otherwise there's no way to replace the guys they're going to lose, and there's no farm system left, and they're saddled with big contracts. Now, that's the Padres. The Dodgers went out and got what they needed. They needed a starter because they've been ravaged by injuries, and they got Jack Flaherty. They obviously needed a setup reliever or a long reliever, and they got Michael Kopech. And then they rented some guys like Kevin Kiermaier from formerly of Tampa Bay and Toronto, and they went out and got him Ed Rosario, who at one time was a pretty good glove guy, and now has had a good season hitting as kind of a super utility guy. The difference between what the Dodgers did to get the quality that they needed versus the Padres is the Dodgers only traded away 1 prospect at the top, Miguel Vargas, second baseman, shortstop, outfielder. He had stalled at AAA. There was really no place for him to play. Everybody else the Dodgers put into these other packages were down in the rookie league, Dominican League, or Class A ball, nowhere near being ready for major leagues. And the intriguing thing to me is the Dodgers, as dominant as the roster is, the Dodgers and all the deals I've made, the Dodgers still have their top 4 minor league pitchers in the system, and they have 2 of their top catchers that are still in the system. So it's going to be a fun August into September to see who can win the National League West. But it's intriguing to me how these general managers have approached doing their business differently. The Dodgers not only have superstars, they still have a future. The Padres have to do it immediately. So just off the top of my head, I give A grades to them. Briefly elsewhere, Yankees, I think the acquisition of Jazz Chisholm is huge because he can play a lot of different positions, and he's a bit of a firebrand as a personality, and he can hit home runs on a roster that's got a bunch of home run hitters. But the flip side of my positive review of the Yankees is they didn't get pitching. And I would have bet the morning of the trade deadline, they would have wound up with Blake Snell, and they did not. And that one just really stunned me that they did not execute that deal, because even if Brian Cashman keeps all of his guys, at the end of the day, if they can't go deep into the playoffs, then making these transactions didn't work when you had the chance to get a massive difference maker in the kind of guy that Blake Snell is. So I would say there, Philadelphia helped itself immensely in the bullpen. They changed the chemistry of the bullpen by getting Carlos Estevez from the Angels, because their relievers were highly erratic and walked a lot of guys. I thought Baltimore, which looked like a team that was running out of gas, helped itself by getting 2 starting pitchers because they have a young rotation to go with Corbin Burns. Now they got 3 veterans on the rotation, plus the kids that are playing very well. I thought Seattle changed the persona of its baseball team. Hitting has been a real problem for the Mariners this season, and yet Seattle goes out and they rent Justin Turner, and in the heat of a pennant race, having him be my DH, I trust him a great deal. And of course, they got Randy Arozarena, who can hit some home runs but puts the ball in play a lot. I thought he helped themselves immensely. So off the top of my head, those are the ones that I thought did really well in terms of, and I don't know if I want to be negative, but at the end of the day, when you're in South Florida and Miami continues to shed payroll, doesn't draw, and doesn't win, when does, quote, the rebuild ever end? Miami wound up with 16 prospects in all the transactions. But hell, they might not win 10 more games the rest of the season. They've traded people away. And Tampa Bay's had real problems. They've been really decimated by injuries and the whole mess with the probably the lifetime suspension of Wander Franco. It's really crippled the Rays. But they went out and they made all these transactions and they wound up with 15 prospects, but they're not going to win for a couple of years because they've lost so many veteran players. And I guess the final comment, please somebody explain to me what San Francisco's doing. San Francisco, are you in the pennant race or are you out of the pennant race? San Francisco, why would you move legitimate power hitter Jorge Soler? Why would you move him to Atlanta and then retain Blake Snell? If you thought you're going to be in the pennant race, wouldn't you want to keep the big bat there? Because they don't have a lot of power hitters outside of Matt Chapman now in San Francisco. Got pretty good pitching. But I just didn't understand what the Giants were doing. When they moved Soler the night before the deadline, I thought, okay, Snell's going to go next. And they didn't. All of a sudden, they're trying to portray themselves as being a pennant contender. I just don't see that. And the last one is in the backyard here, the Angels. I like what they got. I mean, I think the two pitchers they got in the Estevez deal are within a half year maybe of being in the major leagues. And they've got really dominant statistics, the two pitchers that they got from the Philadelphia Phillies. In terms of the Luis Garcia deal, I mean, this is a one-year free agent rental that they shipped to Fenway Park. And Boston sent 4 lower minor leaguers. But a couple of those guys have had really good seasons, even at Class A or Class AA. So that might be a deal that'll pay off maybe a year and a half down the road. I will also say, though, by virtue of that, do they have enough players to put around Mike Trout when they get Mike Trout back next season? Because the Angels' lack of depth and talent still, to me, is kind of a red flag. So, guys, that's just off the top of my head. Those are some of the ways I read what happened at the baseball trading deadline, but it was wild. I would never imagined that many people would go in those deals.
So let's pick this apart a little bit. A lot to dissect there and a lot of good information. We did a trade deadline show. We covered the final 3 hours of the trade deadline. So we were definitely, getting hit with the refresh button on X because Lee just kept coming. It was like a slot machine. Like you said, never-ending deals. So let's start off by talking about the Dodgers, and then we'll go to the Padres and then with the Angels there. So the Dodgers have routinely proven how to run a major league organization, and that's big praise from us. We do not like the Dodgers because we're Angels fans. With that being said, they're a class act organization. They continue to provide minor leaguers, and it never ends, Lee, right? It keeps coming. They keep drafting well. They keep developing well. They never get rid of their guys. And if they do, like you said, it's one, perhaps two guys, but they seem to retain a lot of those young talent and prospects who come up to the major league level. And most of the time they flourish. There's a couple of guys who they've gotten it wrong with. Gavin Lux right now is kind of the name that a lot of Dodger fans aren't happy with because he hasn't exactly panned out just yet. But he could be a late bloomer for all we know. And the other thing with the Dodgers is with their contracts. They have these big name free agents that they've brought in over the years or trade pieces. Mookie Betts was traded for and then signed. Freddie Freeman, another one of those guys. And of course, Shohei Ohtani. None of these guys have been major contracts AAV, right? And the Dodgers have done a great job at that. And I have to give them props for that. And then on the other ticket, you have AJ Preller. Now, AJ Preller has been around San Diego since, is it 2015?
9 years as general manager. He's in his 10th season and never been to a World Series and has traded the farm system away 3 times.
Absolutely. So the first time you had the Rockstar GM era, right? 2015 when you got Matt Kemp, who was abysmal in San Diego. I did not like what he brought. I did not like the mentality he brought to San Diego. You got guys like Derek Norris. You signed James Shield, Justin Upton, Will Myers. None of those guys with perhaps the exception of Will Myers, because what he meant to the locker room was a great pickup. I know Justin Upton made the All-Star team in 2015. So I guess you can say that was successful, question mark. The only good thing that came out of the James Shields signing was the Fernando Tatis trade, which wasn't even the big portion of that trade, right? If I remember correctly, Tatis was almost a throw-in for the trade. They wanted the other pitcher, was it, that they got in that trade. And then you had the hot talent lava era where you drafted guys like Franmil Reyes, Hunter Renfroe, Josh Naylor, just to name a couple. None of those guys in Padres uniforms anymore, nor were any of them there for long periods of time. And now you have the current era. I know you're not crazy about AJ Preller because of his ability to continuously pivot. But that's just two examples of what we've seen from the Dodgers and the Padres.
Okay, let me just interact with you. You got to give credit to the Dodgers, but again, that's big market, number 2 market, Los Angeles market, where they average $4 million per season. The amount of revenue that they bring in is beyond belief. So they can have a $290 million payroll. They can creatively finance something like they did with Showtime, Ohtani's contract and the extension and the deferrals. They're not doing anything illegal, but they're kind of ahead of the curve. I would have thought that if anybody would have done anything like that, it might have been something linked to Steinbrenner in New York, because they were always ahead of the curve. But the Dodgers here have done something creative. It's legal. Major League Baseball was aware of what the Dodgers were proposing to Ohtani and signed off on it. Little known fact, the Dodgers had to take a percentage of every year of Ohtani's contract that's deferred, and that goes into a pool that counts against the amount of money spent, and that money cannot be used. It's something, I want to say something like 6 to 8 million per year of deferred money going to Ohtani is separated from their budget and can't be spent. A lot of people don't know that. But the Dodgers historically have drafted well. Look at the stockpile of arms. Now, granted, some of them are broken down, but that's the modern day baseball that we're living with right now. But the Dodgers historically have drafted well. They've traded well. They've not moved a ton of their prospects, as witnessed by what I just talked about, what the Padres did compared to, obviously, what Andrew Friedman did not do as it relates to the Dodgers. And I just think it's a well-run organization. You don't win 8 division titles in a row, and this would be the 9th if they get to the finish line the 1st of October in first place. You don't win that many division titles unless you have a great organization, great structure, drafting, and all that. So the Dodgers it's different because it's the number 2 market on the planet compared to a small market San Diego. And of course, lost in all the conversation is the Padres have reeled Preller in. Padres are not taking on any more money. The Padres indicated that they did not want him to trade all the blue chip talent in the farm system. And he's got to get to October this year. If he doesn't, he might not be here. If they don't make the playoffs, I would dare say he might exit San Diego this offseason if they don't get to the playoffs. And guys, they're in a real dogfight right now for a wild card spot. I don't know.
Lee, does he have 2 years left?
Through 2027. Okay. But the owners have used the word accountability. Their feeling was, and they've used that term to me multiple times, talking about the future of the organization. And to me, accountability is we've let you do everything you want for 9 years or into your 10th year. You have spent beyond the budget we could have ever imagined for a, quote, smaller market team. We got to see a finish line here, and the finish line has to be games in October. And if you can get to the World Series, that'd be great. But guys, you look at the pennant race standings now with 6.5, 7 weeks to go in the season. My goodness, there's a dogfight, because here comes Arizona and San Francisco thinks it's in there, and you still got Atlanta trying to recover from all their injuries, and you got wild card teams fighting for their lives in the Central Division. So this thing is far.
And don't sleep on Pittsburgh either.
Pittsburgh, there's a difference between having an established team that knows how to win versus being a really young team with a really young pitching staff that has never been there and doesn't know what that stage is going to be like. So I kind of discount Pittsburgh, even though they've got themselves 3 really good young starting pitchers. But I think you got to walk down that dark alley once or twice as a team to be able to survive that dark alley, AKA postseason playoffs. So that's my assessment of the Dodgers and the Padres.
Real quickly, since we talked a little bit about the standings, currently right now, before the game tonight with the Phillies, the Dodgers are only 3.5 up on those Diamondbacks you just mentioned, 4 up on the Padres. In your mind, realistically, injuries or not, can the Dodgers hold those two teams off? Do you see a world where one of those teams hops them before the end of the season?
I think we have to hold our breath on the Dodgers to get a better understanding who's back and can they be back to what they used to be. Kershaw looks to be a shell of himself right now, but they'll be patient with him as long as they humanly can. That's a big issue. I just don't know that Kershaw will ever be what Kershaw was again. But that being said, if he's at the back end of the rotation in the postseason, you'll trust him for 5 innings. I don't know that we're going to see Buehler back at this point. Maybe he's tried to come back too quickly from the second surgery. There's a staggering statistic nobody's talked about. As we chat on your podcast tonight, guys, the Dodgers have used 34 different pitchers this season. And we're not even to September 1st. 34. The Dodgers have used 17 pitchers that have gone on the disabled list this season. I've been covering baseball a long time. I've never seen anybody have 17 pitchers on the DL and dudes are in first place. Can you imagine that? And since July 1st, just this last calendar month, the Dodgers have used 11 different starting pitchers because they've had so many injuries, and they're still in first place. Now you're going to get Mookie Betts back. I don't know if Muncy will be back. I'm not sure which of the battered guys on the DL are going to come back and contribute, but getting Flaherty helps a great deal. They do believe they're going to get Yamamoto back within a week if they can monitor his pitch count, etc. So, that's really interesting to just keep an eye on that storyline situation. What the Dodgers are. But for them to be in first place with all this adversity, I don't see that in baseball hardly anytime, anywhere.
So, speaking of the Dodgers, and you have been around the San Diego sports landscape for decades. With that being said, what do you have to say to people who think that Dave Roberts isn't a good major league manager because of his quote unquote October failures?
I think at the end of the day, you have to define, is it him or is it the people above him giving him all the information and the data? I really believe that the sabermetric people, the analytic guys upstairs, are walking down with a sheet of paper and saying, this is whom we recommend you use first guy out of the bullpen if the starter gets in trouble. This is the kind of matchup we want if we get to the end of the game. We need a pinch hitter. I'm not so sure it's strictly Dave Roberts' call. I think there's a lot of influence there upstairs. Now, I grant you, very frustrating postseasons for the Dodgers more recently. The fact they've only been to the World Series and gotten it one time. This is an end result of decisions made during the heat of the game as to, how many times am I going to use Joe Kelly? And do I really need Max Scherzer coming out of the bullpen in between starts, which then impacted him for the follow-up start? So there's and the use of Kershaw. So that has happened. Now, is that strictly on Dave Roberts, or is that a combination of what Friedman and Gomes and the analytic guys are sending down from upstairs? It's easy to point the finger at Dave Roberts, but at the end of the day, historically, he's got a better one-loss record than Lasorda, a better one-loss percentage winning record than Smokey Alston. So what are we arguing about here? And again, is it strictly him or is it the people above him? I think that has to be part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Good take. And one thing, if I could get us over to the Angels real quick, as far as you bring up those 2 trades we got, 2 rentals got us 6 players in all actuality. How many will pan out, we don't know, but you mentioned the talent. When you saw those 2 trades go down, Lee, in your mind, were you thinking to yourself, okay, it looks like the Angels are going all in on a sell and try to recoup prospects, sort of like what Miami and Tampa Bay did?
A little bit of that. But there was really no alternative because they weren't going anywhere this year because they've been ravaged by injuries to their pitching staff. And there is no Rendon. And now Trout has, the double setback with the meniscus problem in the knee. It's just been a lost season because of a ton of injuries. I've gone through emotional roller coasters with this franchise. I sat there and there were periods of time I thought Reed Detmers has arrived as a starter. I thought he last year pitched really well. And he was 3-0 out of the gate at the start of the season. I said, this is your number one guy.
Yep.
And then he can't get people out. And then he goes to Salt Lake City and it gets even worse. I mean, his ERA in the Pacific Coast League is absurd for an established major league pitcher. So that's an issue. And we saw flashes where I thought Sandoval had arrived as a frontline guy last year. And then he has the lousy start. Then he gathers it back in the middle of this season. And then he goes down and has surgery. Same thing with Canning. I thought there were chunks of time last year. Canning is right on the doorstep of being really trustworthy. And he scuffled all year. And some of that's got to do with physical injuries. And now they've got the young guy, Soriano. They've just never had everybody together where you thought, okay, this is the team. It's going to grow together. I like the shortstop. I like the catcher. I think the first baseman's getting better and better. And obviously there's the black cloud of injury that's over Mike Trout. I think the other thing that just kind of drives me crazy is just a couple of years ago when they drafted 21 pitchers and 21 draft selections. And there's only 2 guys that got to the major leagues and both have had surgery and are both out. Seth is just the young right-hander is the latest one that's gone down. So, I mean, that turned out to be a draft that they did something radically different by taking 21 arms and virtually they traded some released, and then the couple of ones that you thought were going to be in the major leagues both had surgery. So it's an organization that to me has still got just some significant stuff going on as to what is the blueprint, what is the game plan, things of that nature.
And one last thing to that, and that's great takes, Lee. How surprised were you that Anderson wasn't moved?
He's not had a dominant season. Granted, a couple of years ago, he really surprised everybody by what he did with the Dodgers, and then they signed the 3-year contract at, I think it was 3 years, $45 million. But he hasn't had a good season this year. I think his record's 8-11. His numbers are pretty high. And maybe some people didn't think that he's going to be a big difference maker in my rotation. And by the way, do I want to get on the hook for half of the $15 million he's owed this year and the $15 million he's owed next year? So I was a little bit surprised. I don't think his market was all that high. So they've got him, and he's going to have to pitch, and we'll just see where it goes there. But I think the bigger story is I know they shopped Detmers. They couldn't find any takers. Can they solve that mystery? Because, boy, he had a chunk where he looked really good. And can Sandoval come back and be what Sandoval has shown in those flashes? And then you got Canning. So they've got some good everyday players right now. They still have holes. I don't see much left in the farm system. They got to solve the mystery with the pitchers. And I don't know what they're going to do in free agency. And again, this all spins back then just to the top of the ownership hierarchy. Does Arte Moreno want to win? Does he just want to own the team? We can't keep treading water the way it's treading water. And do you bring the general manager back because his contract is up too? So
correct.
A lot of unanswered questions in the 714 area code right now.
Yeah, Arte Moreno, we've covered the man and the front office at nauseum. I mean, a man who has never gone out of his way to particularly treat minor leaguers well. And you look at an organization like the Dodgers, who have not only provided the minimum amount of meals, but always went above and beyond that. They always pampered their minor leaguers. And you can see what happens when you treat your minor league guys with respect, and you're treating them like world-class athletes. You continuously get major leaguers who produce, right? They're homegrown guys. They knew the Dodger way. They were taught the Dodger way.
International
so when the lights come on, what's that?
I was saying international players, they took care too.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
I'll just respond a little bit differently from your take.
Okay.
You're referencing what happened a couple of years ago when the Angels kind of got caught, and the Angels had not done a good job taking care of their lower minor leaguers and the Caribbean players. I think that's all changed. That's all changed because the Players Association now represents minor league baseball players too. So yes. I would say
they get unionized now. Yes.
Yeah, the statements you're making were in effect 2 to 4 years ago. That doesn't exist anymore because of the new structures that the union has put in place and what you have to do to take care of your players, especially in the lower minor leagues, which is a very, very tough existence. But these kids, they're getting paid more, depending on where you are, if you're an A, AA, AAA, and the lifestyle is much better. And rooming and housing is much better than it was when you had 5 Angel players in one bedroom, sleeping in the living room, etc. So what was then, and you have a right to critique then, is not what's going on now. But you have to make a structural decision. Who's the best baseball guy that can run this franchise? Is it Perry Manassian, the general manager, or do they want to go a different direction? And that means maybe you're going to start all over again. I think October, November, going to the baseball winter meetings in December, it's going to be fascinating to see what the Angels do, or they're just going to continue to drift the way they've drifted, which is not what the fans in Southern California want, nor Angel fans in Orange County deserve.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue, it seems like Artie Moreno, compared to some other owners, does tend to overstep a little bit. There's a lot of people who have that critique of him, very Jerry Jones-esque, where, Jerry Jones kind of runs the show in Dallas, right? He makes all the decisions. He's the general manager. He's the owner. And certainly not to that level. Artie Moreno isn't literally the general manager, but a lot of people say he's responsible for some of those bigger contracts that necessarily didn't work out. And he seemingly isn't doing that now. Obviously, the Angels haven't made any giant free agent signings lately, but it'd be interesting to see if he's going to do something like that this offseason.
I was going to say, Lee, if you have any kind of leeways or any kind of people whispering in your ear what the Angels are going to do, let us know, because we're Angel fans, and we would love to know what the pulse is or what they are planning, if they have a plan. Because like you said, there's so much uncertainty, and I think that's what hurts Angel fans too. Is at least you could see other teams building towards the future, the Royals coming up, and other teams around the league. You kind of see where it took them a couple hundred lost seasons to get where they're going, or they made the right general manager move. They put the money in the scouting, and the organization took a different look. It's like you said, we're spinning our wheels, and it's frustrating because even with a general manager potentially on his way out, who's to say the next general manager is not going to like Ron Washington, when a lot of fans have warmed up to Ron Washington, but then he's only got another year left. So yeah, we're just frustrated, Lee.
Well, I think everybody is, but you're not the only one. You look at what's gone on around baseball, and half the markets, the owners don't seem content to invest, to build, to get really better. Kansas City was in first place for a while, and they kind of faltered and kind of fell back. And the Royals went through a lot of bad seasons where they didn't spend a nickel. And then they finally spent some money, got good, and then their guys got hurt. Minnesota had a flash in a pan for a year or two, and look where they are in the standings right now. They've been scuffling. There are people that do it right. I mean, you look at Cleveland's roster, you shake your head. They're doing this with a much smaller payroll, and they're doing it with a lot of home-developed guys and some guys they got from the Padres. Cleveland's a pretty good baseball team. And they look at Baltimore. I watched the Padres play the Orioles in Baltimore a week and a half ago, and 8 of the top 9 players in the lineup one night were all Oriole draft picks. And that's a team that came through some horrible times with bad ownership led by Peter Angelos. And then they hired a general manager, Mike Elias, and he went in with all the losing. Virtually every kid he drafted turned out. And Baltimore is fighting for first place, and they got 3 of their starting pitchers are on the deal with season-ending elbow surgery, and yet they got a foundation, which the Angels need to get. And then they went out and developed some pitching, and then they made trades to get veteran pitchers on rentals. That's made a huge difference. I only see a fraction of that right now at Angel Stadium. Like I say, I like Zach at shortstop, and I like Logan the catcher. I think the first baseman's grown into the position, but they're going to need a lot more than just them, and they're going to need to get these pitchers back healthy. So I'm not sure whether Perry is the right guy for the job, whether he's been restrained by ownership while trying to do his job, or whether you just go forward, because you've seen some flashes. I mean, Ron Washington has convinced these kids, just play for tonight and be better tonight than you were last night and kind of grow and mature. So he's popular, and I don't think his job's in jeopardy. They just need to get more players around them to see if they can make this thing grow. And then that comes from Artie Moreno. What kind of organization do you want? How are you going to invest? How are you going to fix it?
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess as we slowly wrap up here, I'll say this. We have 3.5 years of podcasts now where I've been saying, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't, I believe that the days of truly having the evil empire Yankees are over. When I was growing up, that was what teams like the Yankees did, right? They bought the talent, they brought those guys together, and they won championships. Baseball today doesn't seem to work like that anymore. And the Angels have tried, right? They've gotten the Hamiltons, they've gotten the Pujols, C.J. Wilson, the list goes on, where they've tried to create a super team by just plugging these guys in. And I feel like with today's modern day baseball, it doesn't work anymore. Maybe it's the analytics, maybe it's something else. But a lot of these teams seem to have success by, like you said, having a lot of these homegrown guys going through the mud together, having these 100 loss seasons, the Astros, the Orioles, the Cubs, the Royals. These are teams that did it the right way. They got a core together. They kept them together through thick and thin. And then they used free agency to grab one, maybe two guys. Look what the Rangers did 2 years ago, even. They got Simeon, they got Seager, and people thought Chris Young had lost it, right? Why are you spending almost $1 billion on these two guys when you guys aren't going to be contending for a couple years? And look what the Rangers did last year. Now Chris Young is a genius again. So truly, I believe that you need to build from within and use free agency to plug and play. And that's the only way to do it these days.
Well, I think it's a combination. I think you got to draft well, aka what the Orioles have done. You got to develop them well, aka look at that Dodger pitching staff and what is in that farm system. Then you have to be a player internationally. Now, granted, Marty Moreno got Ohtani, but have they been a player on a year in, year out basis that takes a financial commitment to go in there, and maybe you have to overpay a little bit to get a Japanese free agent. But I mean, you're getting players from everywhere right now. I don't see that on a consistent basis. Have they drafted well? Not really. Have they done much in free agency? Nah, aside from short-term rentals. And outside of Ohtani 6 years ago, have they done anything in the Pacific Rim? Because everybody's getting guys out of Japan. They have to be a player in that market, and that's a financial commitment that ownership has to make.
True. Lee, I got one more question for you, and I appreciate your time once again. And I'm glad you got your AC fixed down there because it's been brutal. So we're happy because we want a happy Lee. We don't want a grumpy Lee because I get pretty grumpy when in this heat. So with that being said, Lee, I had a personal question. What's the last stadium you've been to here in the LA or California area?
Well, obviously spent a lot of time in Petco Park. Back in the day when I was doing sports talk radio, we actually did our sports talk shows from Angel Stadium. We talked our way in and they let us do it from out front. Then we did it down in the restaurant, down the right field line, I think it was, multiple times. And I've been to Dodger Stadium a couple of times. I love it. Never broadcast from Dodger Stadium. Historically, I went to Vero Beach, which to me personally was an unbelievable thrill to do my talk shows back in the day on the old 690, back in the day from Dodger Town. I'm a huge freaking historical baseball guy. So to get there and to walk those lawns where Jackie Robinson was and Branch Rickey was and all the great Dodgers of yesteryear and have the chance to talk to Vin Scully. So my spring training junkets, I think we went 3 straight years to Vero Beach. That was kind of cool. So, I've been a lot of different places, done a lot of different things, got flashback memories to most of them.
Nice. Vero Beach. A lot of recent Dodger fans don't remember Vero Beach, but that was the hub, man.
That broke my heart when they sold it. When Frank McCourt announced they were selling it, that really broke my heart because I'm a big man on tradition and history, and Vero Beach and Dodger Town was just really part of Dodger baseball tradition. I said to many of my friends, if that place, if Holman Field, if Dodger Town could talk, could it tell you some stories about all the great players that have walked across those baseball diamonds, those practice fields? It's really a cool place. And of course, it's still there. It still exists. It's used for amateur baseball. The O'Malley family bought a piece of it and still runs it. And through the workage of MLB, it is a place that they host a lot of national baseball tournaments. So there's still a little bit of tradition there, but it's not the Dodger Town that I knew and the Dodger Town that I think fans who flew from the West Coast to experience Vero Beach loved. It's a piece of history. It really is.
Yeah, it was much like when the Yankees go down there to face like the Marlins or when they're down there for their minors. they have a whole class of fans that are in the Florida area because of that. They're either transplants or they became Yankee fans. I think you had a lot of Dodger fans in the Florida area become Dodger fans because of the Vero Beach experience.
Yeah, very much so. And again, there's a lot of Northeasterners who had emotional ties to the Dodgers, the Brooklyn Dodgers, that still live down there. And obviously, there's not a lot of Northeasterners or New York Mets fans and Yankee fans. And I mean, the Grapefruit Circuit's kind of cool. The Cactus League is a little bit different, but the Grapefruit Circuit has much more history attached to it because that's baseball that goes back to the 1930s and 40s when they first went down there and trained down there.
Do you have any memories of? Did you ever go down to Palm Springs to see the Angel spring training down there?
No, not. I never had a chance. By the time I was doing sports talk radio out in San Diego, we go to Yuma. I was the first one that took our talk shows to Yuma, where the Padres used to change, and then obviously it went into Peoria, Arizona. But never been to Palm Springs. Know that the Angels trained there. I mean, back in the day, way back in the day, before me, before you, before everybody watching this podcast. The Cubs trained in Palm Springs. The Cubs trained at Catalina Island, if you can imagine that. Now this goes way back into the 1940s, but there's a lot of cool old time history. The Pirates trained in Hollywood because their AAA farm club at one point was the Hollywood Stars. The old Pacific Coast League was up and down the West Coast with the LA franchise, the Hollywood Stars franchise, the San Diego Padres of the Pacific Coast League, the teams in Seattle and Vancouver, etc. So a lot of great old-time baseball history in this marketplace, aside from the major league teams that we're talking about.
The Hollywood Stars became the Padres, right?
Excuse me?
The Hollywood Stars became the Padres, didn't they move down to Lane Field?
Must have been. I believe you're correct. That would have been in the late 50s, early 60s.
Okay, yeah, I grew up in San Diego. Funny enough, I grew up an Angels fan, but I had the book about San Diego baseball history, the one that had Ted Williams on it that they sold at Costco, and I used to read that thing forwards and backwards. So,
yeah, great history. The old Coast League was marvelous because at that point there weren't that many major league teams in baseball, and guys would come and play in the Coast League because they could get paid very well, and they stayed in the Coast League, and they liked the lifestyle in the Coast League. I mean, they were just a half step below major leagues, but they couldn't get to Fenway Park or Yankee Stadium, couldn't make a major league roster, but they did very well out here. And the travel was a heck of a lot easier in the Coast League than it was if you were in the old American Association in the Midlands or the old International League, which was stretched from Canada down the Eastern Seaboard to Havana. There used to be a AAA ball club in Havana before Castro took over in 1959, then Havana Sugar Kings. So it's a lot of really cool history of minor league baseball. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced it or looked at it. The Society for American Baseball Research, SABR. There's a lot of people do a lot of independent research. They have written some unbelievably great articles and essays on minor league baseball from all over. And you can actually join SABR as a fan and be part of their research or just get access to all their data. It's a fascinating thing. If you love the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, you're a junkie. If you love the Hall of Fame, you got to auto-investigate what SABR, SABR, has to offer the fans because you'd be junkie squared. It's really kind of cool.
I'll have to do that. And if I ever have one request from you, if you ever have 30 minutes or an hour during the off season, I'd love to talk just baseball history because I'm a big fan of just old baseball history.
Gentlemen, good to talk to you. We'll see what happens the rest of August through September and who gets to first place when by the time we get to the finish line. Always nice to be with you.
Thank you, Lee, so much for your time. And again, check out LeeHacksawHamilton.com for his outstanding blogs. He will give you the best 30 minutes of all sports. He lets you know everything.
And we're on the air Mondays at 1 p.m., Thursdays at 1 p.m. with my podcast on YouTube, Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. Guys, good to talk to you. Be well.
You too.
Thank you, Lee.